When I first met Sophia, she was everything I could have ever wanted in a partner. She was beautiful, with sparkling hazel eyes and a warm, infectious smile that seemed to brighten every room she entered. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated me, it was her wit, her kindness, and the way she made me feel like the most important person in the world. Our relationship started with the kind of romance you only see in movies. Spontaneous road trips, candlelit dinners, and long, late-night conversations about our dreams for the future. We were young, full of hope, and ready to conquer the world together. After 2 years of dating, I proposed to her at the beach where we'd had our first kiss. She cried, said yes, and the next thing I knew, we were planning our wedding, a beautiful outdoor ceremony surrounded by friends and family. The first few years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We moved into a cozy little house, painted the walls together, and built a life filled with laughter and love. Sophia and I supported each other through everything. I encouraged her as she pursued her dream of opening a small bakery, and she stood by me as I worked long hours at my job as a software engineer. We celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small, and leaned on each other during tough times. I genuinely believed we had the perfect marriage. But as the years went on, life inevitably began to settle into a routine. The spontaneous adventures became less frequent, replaced by the daily grind of work, bills, and responsibilities. It wasn't that we stopped loving each other, we just got comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. Our conversations shifted from dreams of the future to mundane topics like grocery lists and scheduling conflicts. Date nights became rare, often postponed because one of us was too tired or too busy. I chalked it up to the natural ebb and flow of married life. After all, no one stays in the honeymoon phase forever, right? But in hindsight, I can see that the cracks had already started to form. Over time, the spark that had once defined our relationship grew dimmer. We didn't fight much, there were no screaming matches or slamming doors. Instead, we drifted apart in a way that was almost imperceptible at first. Sophia threw herself into her bakery, pouring long hours into making it successful. She was passionate, and her hard work paid off. The place became a local favorite, known for its fresh pastries and warm, welcoming atmosphere. I was proud of her, but I also missed her. She came home exhausted most nights, barely speaking more than a few words before collapsing onto the couch. I wasn't much better. My job had gotten more demanding as I climbed the corporate ladder. Late nights in front of my laptop became the norm, and I often found myself distracted even when we were together. We still had good moments, quiet mornings sipping coffee together, laughing at our favorite TV shows, celebrating small milestones. But there was a growing distance between us, one that neither of us seemed to know how to bridge. I noticed little things that made me wonder if she felt the same. She started spending more time on her phone, scrolling through social media or messaging friends late into the evening. When I'd ask her about it, she'd smile and say, "Just catching up with everyone. You know how it is." I wanted to believe her. After all, it wasn't unusual for her to stay connected with friends. But something about her tone didn't feel right, like she was deflecting. I told myself I was overthinking it. We were both busy, stressed, and caught up in the chaos of daily life. It wasn't fair to expect things to be like they were in the beginning. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, and not for the better. The first time I noticed something was off, it was subtle, so subtle that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. It was a Thursday night, and Sophia was sitting on the couch, her legs tucked under her as she scrolled through her phone. I was at the dining table, finishing up some work on my laptop, when I heard her giggle. Not just a casual chuckle, but a genuine, light-hearted laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in weeks. "Something funny?" I asked, glancing up from my screen. She looked at me, her face flushed. "Oh, it's just a silly meme a friend sent me," she said, quickly locking her phone and setting it down beside her. I smiled, trying to brush it off, but the moment stayed with me. Sophia wasn't usually one to laugh at random memes, and the way she'd locked her phone so quickly struck me as odd. Over the next few days, I started to notice little things I hadn't paid attention to before. She was spending more time on her phone, often retreating to another room to take calls or reply to messages. When I'd ask who she was talking to, her answers were vague. "Just Natalie," she'd say, referring to one of her best friends. "We're planning a girls' night out." But the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she was trying to preempt any further questions. One evening, as we sat watching TV, her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and quickly flipped it face down on the coffee table. "Who's that?" I asked casually. "Work stuff," she replied, not looking at me. It was such a small thing, but the pit in my stomach tightened. Sophia had always been open with her phone before, leaving it lying around without a second thought. Now, she seemed to guard it like it held some kind of secret. I told myself I was being paranoid. Sophia loved me, and we'd been through too much together for her to suddenly start hiding things. Still, the unease lingered, like an itch I couldn't quite scratch. I decided to let it go, for now. After all, I had no real reason to doubt her, and the last thing I wanted was to create a problem where there wasn't one. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. A few weeks passed, and the uneasy feeling in my gut only grew stronger. Sophia's behavior was becoming harder to ignore. Late at night, long after we'd usually go to bed, I'd hear the faint murmur of her voice coming from the living room. At first, I thought she might be on the phone with one of her friends. It wasn't unusual for her to catch up with them, especially when they were planning events or venting about work. But the pattern became impossible to dismiss. One night, I woke up to the sound of her laughing softly. It was almost midnight, and the house was otherwise silent. I got out of bed quietly and crept to the doorway of the living room. Sophia was sitting on the couch, her legs curled up under her, holding her phone to her ear. She was smiling, blushing, even, as she spoke in a hushed tone. "Stop it," she said playfully, her voice light and teasing. "You're terrible." A wave of unease crashed over me. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but there was something about her tone that felt different. It wasn't the way she talked to her friends or coworkers. This was more intimate, more personal. I stepped back into the shadows before she could notice me. My heart was pounding, a mix of fear and anger swirling in my chest. When she came to bed later, I pretended to be asleep. I wasn't ready to confront her, not without knowing more. The next morning, as we sat having coffee, I considered bringing it up. But what would I even say? That I'd overheard her laughing on the phone? That I thought she sounded too happy? I didn't want to come off as paranoid or controlling. And maybe I was overreacting. After all, Sophia had always been a naturally bubbly person. Maybe there was nothing to it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That same day, another moment added to my growing doubts. As we were cleaning up after breakfast, Sophia's phone buzzed with a notification. It was sitting on the counter, and out of instinct, I glanced at it. The screen displayed a message preview, but before I could read it, Sophia grabbed the phone and tucked it into her pocket. "Work stuff," she said quickly, not meeting my eyes. It wasn't like her to be so guarded. Normally, she'd leave her phone lying around without a second thought. That night, as I lay in bed, the unease gnawed at me. I didn't want to believe she was hiding something, but her actions were becoming harder to ignore. It was a quiet Friday night, and I'd gone to bed early after a long, grueling week at work. Sophia had stayed up, claiming she wanted to finish a new Netflix series. I didn't think much of it. Staying up late was typical for her, especially on weekends. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of her laughter. This wasn't a casual chuckle or the kind of laugh she'd have at a funny scene on TV. It was light, playful, and full of a familiarity that set me on edge. I slid out of bed and moved toward the hallway. The closer I got to the living room, the clearer her voice became. "You're so ridiculous," she said, giggling. "No, stop, it's not like that." My heart sank as I peeked around the corner. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, her phone pressed to her ear, her face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. I couldn't make out every word, but what I heard was enough. "You always know how to make me laugh," she said softly. "I don't even know why I'm still awake, but I'm glad I am." I clenched my fists, my emotions warring between anger, confusion, and a desperate hope that this wasn't what it looked like. I stepped back before she noticed me, retreating to the bedroom with my mind racing. Who was she talking to? Why hadn't I noticed this sooner? And, most importantly, why did it sound like she was talking to someone who wasn't me? The next morning, I tried to act normal as we sat down for breakfast. Sophia seemed cheerful, humming to herself as she prepared coffee. "How was your show last night?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, it was good," she said with a smile. "I ended up watching a couple of episodes and then just scrolling through my phone for a while. You know, the usual." The lie hit me like a punch to the gut. She'd been on the phone for nearly an hour, laughing and chatting like a schoolgirl. And yet, here she was, pretending it had never happened. That day, I found myself consumed by the memory of her laughter. I couldn't let it go. Something about the way she'd spoken to whoever was on the other end of that call felt too personal, too intimate. For the first time in our marriage, I started to question her loyalty. It wasn't a place I wanted to go, but her actions were leading me there. I decided to keep my suspicions to myself, at least for now. But I knew one thing for sure, I needed to find out the truth. The laughter haunted me for days, echoing in my mind every time Sophia picked up her phone or smiled at a text. I knew I couldn't confront her yet, not without proof, but the weight of my suspicions was becoming unbearable. One night, as I sat in the bedroom pretending to work on my laptop, I heard her phone buzz from the living room. She wasn't there, having stepped outside to water the plants. The phone buzzed again, then again, as if whoever was messaging her wasn't content to wait. I glanced toward the open door, my heart racing. This was my chance. I walked out to the living room, trying to ignore the guilt gnawing at me. Her phone sat on the coffee table, the screen lit up with notifications. The name on the messages wasn't one I recognized, Ryan. "Ryan, that last picture. Stunning. Ryan, when can I see more?" My stomach twisted as I swiped up to unlock her phone, praying she hadn't changed her password. To my relief, and growing horror, the screen opened. I scrolled up through their conversation, my hands shaking. The messages were flirty, intimate, and filled with compliments that made my blood boil. Then I saw them, photos. They weren't just playful selfies or casual snapshots. These were photos of Sophia completely naked, taken in our bedroom, with her posed in ways that made it clear they weren't meant for my eyes. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the images burning into my mind. This wasn't a harmless flirtation. This was a betrayal, a line crossed that I couldn't ignore. Before I could think of what to do next, I heard the sound of the back door opening. Sophia was coming inside. I quickly locked her phone and placed it back on the table, retreating to the bedroom as my mind raced. When Sophia came to bed that night, she acted as if nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, wished me good night, and fell asleep within minutes. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my emotions swirling between rage, heartbreak, and denial. I wanted to wake her up and confront her, to demand an explanation for what I'd seen. But a part of me wasn't ready. What if it was just a phase? A mistake she'd regret? I wasn't sure I could handle the answers. For now, I decided to wait. To see if this was something she'd stop on her own, or if it was the beginning of the end. In the days that followed, I couldn't look at Sophia without feeling a mix of anger and despair. I replayed the images and messages in my mind, searching for any explanation that didn't lead to the obvious truth: she was betraying me. I tried to act normal, hoping to catch more hints of what was going on. She seemed oblivious to my suspicions, going about her days as if nothing had changed. Then, one night, the situation escalated. It was past midnight when I woke up to find her side of the bed empty. The faint sound of her voice drifted down the hallway. I got up quietly and walked toward the living room, careful not to make a sound. When I reached the doorway, I froze. Sophia was sitting on the couch, her phone angled up, her face illuminated by its glow. She was completely naked, her hair tousled as she struck a seductive pose. She didn't notice me standing there, too focused on taking another picture. "Are you serious right now?" I blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. She jumped, nearly dropping her phone as she scrambled to grab a blanket. Her face was a mixture of shock and guilt. "James! What are you doing up? What am I doing up?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "What the hell are you doing, Sophia? Sending naked photos in the middle of the night?" She stammered, clutching the blanket around her. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. "Then tell me what it is," I said, crossing my arms. "Because it looks exactly like you're sending pictures to someone who isn't me." She hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. It's just a stupid thing. It doesn't mean anything." I was bored, and I got carried away. "Bored?" I said, my voice rising. "That's your excuse. You got carried away. With who, Sophia? Who are you even talking to?" Her silence was answer enough. "Is it Ryan?" I pressed, my anger boiling over. "I saw the messages, Sophia. I saw everything." Her face crumpled, and she broke into sobs. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she cried. "It started as nothing, a stupid flirtation. But then what?" I snapped. "You decided to send him pictures of yourself? You decided to humiliate me like this?" She buried her face in her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she whispered. "I don't know why I did it." Her words felt hollow, like she was searching for excuses rather than taking responsibility. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force. "I can't even look at you right now," I said finally, my voice shaking. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk about this in the morning." As I walked away, her sobs followed me down the hallway. But I didn't feel sympathy, only a deep, crushing sense of loss. I had always trusted Sophia completely. And now, that trust was shattered. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The events of the night before replayed in my mind, each memory sharper and more painful than the last. Sophia's tears, her weak excuses, the sight of her on the couch taking those photos, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table, clutching a mug of coffee like it was the only thing holding her together. Her eyes were red and puffy, evidence of a sleepless night spent crying. "James," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I nodded, sitting down across from her. But I couldn't bring myself to look at her directly. "I don't even know where to start," she began, her hands shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I stared at the table, my jaw clenched. "Then why did it happen, Sophia? Why were you talking to him in the first place?" She hesitated, tears streaming down her face. I was lonely, James. You've been so busy with work, and I've been feeling invisible. When Ryan started messaging me, it felt nice. Like someone noticed me again." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice laced with bitterness. No, she said quickly. I'm not blaming you. This is on me, completely. I don't know how it got this far. I shook my head, trying to process what she was saying. You didn't know how it got this far. Sophia, you sent him naked pictures. You giggled on the phone with him while I was sleeping in the next room. How can you sit here and tell me it doesn't mean anything? She broke down, sobbing into her hands. I know I screwed up, she choked out. I know I've ruined everything. But James, I still love you. Please, please don't give up on us. Her words twisted the knife in my chest. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the life we'd built together. But the trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage was gone, shattered into a million pieces. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Sophia kept trying to talk, but I couldn't bear to hear her excuses anymore. I needed space, time to think. I went for a long drive, the quiet hum of the road my only companion. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Could I forgive her? Could we ever get back to the way things were? Or was this the beginning of the end? Every time I thought about staying, I remembered the messages, the photos, the sound of her laughter on the phone. The betrayal felt too deep, too deliberate to simply move past. By the time I got home, I still didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure, things could never go back to the way they were. The days after Sophia's betrayal were filled with an oppressive silence. We lived like strangers in the same house, exchanging only the most basic words necessary to get through the day. The pain in my chest felt constant, a heavy reminder of the trust she'd destroyed. One evening, she broke the silence. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when she came and sat next to me. Her presence was hesitant, as if she knew she was trespassing. James, she began softly, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but please. I need to say this. I turned off the TV and faced her, my expression unreadable. Go ahead. I don't even know how to start making this right, she said, her voice trembling. I've been thinking about everything, how much I've hurt you, how much I've taken for granted. And I don't even know where to begin to fix it. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I love you, James. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but I do. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I'll regret it forever. But I don't want to lose you. Her words were raw, filled with desperation. But as I listened, all I could feel was a dull ache. I'm willing to do anything, she continued. Counseling, cutting off contact with Ryan, anything it takes to earn your trust back. I know it won't be easy, but I'm ready to fight for us. I let out a long sigh, leaning back against the couch. Do you even realize how much damage you've done? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. You didn't just hurt me, Sophia. You destroyed everything we built together. Our trust, our intimacy, our marriage. It's all gone. Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. I know, she whispered. I know I don't deserve another chance. But please, James, just give me one. Let me prove to you that I can be better. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that the woman I'd fallen in love with was still there, buried beneath the mistakes. But every time I looked at her, I saw the phone, the photos, the messages. I need time to think, I said finally, my voice hollow. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Take all the time you need, she said. Just, please don't give up on me. As she left the room, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions, anger, sadness, hope, and doubt. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't even know if I wanted to. The following week was a blur of indecision. I kept replaying Sophia's apology in my mind, wondering if there was a path forward. She was trying, cutting back on her phone use, asking how she could make things right, even suggesting couples therapy. On the surface, it seemed like she was committed to fixing things. But beneath her efforts, the trust we'd once shared was irreparably broken. Every kind word, every gesture, felt hollow. I couldn't shake the images of her betrayal, the sound of her laughter late at night when she thought I wasn't listening. And then, just when I thought I might consider trying to forgive her, she made the decision for me. It was late one evening, and Sophia had gone out to run errands. I was cleaning the kitchen when her tablet buzzed with a notification. Curious, I glanced at the screen. It was synced with her phone, and a new message had appeared. It was from Ryan. "Ryan, miss you. Hope I didn't get you in trouble last week, winking face. The blood drained from my face. My hands shook as I unlocked the tablet and opened the message thread. The conversation wasn't lengthy, but it was enough to confirm what I'd feared: she hadn't truly ended things with him. "Ryan, can't wait to see you again. Sophia, I'm not sure when I can sneak away, things are complicated right now." Sneak away. She was still lying to me, still betraying me even as she claimed to be working to repair our marriage. When she came home later that night, I was waiting for her in the living room, the tablet in my hand. "Care to explain this?" I said, holding up the screen. Her face went pale as she saw the messages. "James, Save it," I said, cutting her off. "You've had every chance to come clean, every chance to fix this, and you've done nothing but lie to my face." "I didn't mean for you to see that," she stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "That's the problem, Sophia," I said, my voice breaking. "You're not sorry for what you've done. You're sorry you got caught." She broke down, falling to her knees and sobbing. "Please, James," she cried. "I'll block him. I'll delete everything. Just give me one more chance." I shook my head, my heart heavy but resolute. "It's too late," I said. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living with someone I can't trust." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. "You made your choice, Sophia," I said. "And now I'm making mine. I'm done." That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going or what came next, but I knew one thing for certain: our marriage was over. After I walked out of our home, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. I rented a small apartment on the other side of town, far enough away that I wouldn't accidentally run into Sophia. I didn't tell anyone where I was at first, not friends, not family. I needed time to process everything, to figure out how to rebuild my life from the wreckage of our marriage. The first few weeks were a blur. My days were spent going through the motions at work, and my nights were filled with a mix of anger and heartbreak. I replayed every moment of her betrayal, every red flag I had ignored, every excuse she had given. Sophia tried to contact me repeatedly, leaving long, tearful voicemails and sending emails that ranged from apologetic to desperate. I deleted them without listening or reading. Her words no longer meant anything to me. It didn't take long for word of our split to spread, and with it came the fallout from her actions. Somehow, likely through Ryan himself, photos and messages she had sent to him began to circulate. Small-town gossip spreads fast, and soon, everyone seemed to know about the scandal. Sophia's bakery, once a thriving business, began to suffer. Customers stopped coming, and her reputation took a hit. She tried to act like it didn't bother her, posting smiling selfies and motivational quotes on social media, but the cracks in her facade were obvious. A mutual friend told me that Sophia had confronted Ryan after the leak, only to find that he had already moved on to someone else. She was left to deal with the fallout alone. While Sophia's life was unraveling, mine wasn't much better. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, the whispers and stares followed me everywhere. People looked at me with pity or curiosity, as if my pain was some kind of spectacle for their entertainment. At work, colleagues were kind but distant, unsure of what to say. Friends reached out with well-meaning but awkward attempts to offer support. Even my family, who had always been my rock, struggled to find the right words. The humiliation was overwhelming. I felt like a fool for trusting Sophia, for not seeing the signs sooner. One night, after another exhausting day of dodging judgmental looks and whispered conversations, I finally broke down. I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring at the half-empty bottle of whiskey on the counter, and let the pain consume me. How did it come to this? I whispered to no one. The life I had built, the marriage I had cherished, was gone, replaced by a void I didn't know how to fill. But even in that moment of despair, something inside me refused to give up. I had survived this long. I could survive a little longer. The weeks after my breakdown were some of the hardest of my life. But in those moments of despair, I made a choice. I wouldn't let Sophia's betrayal define me. She had taken so much from me, my trust, my marriage, my sense of self-worth, but she wouldn't take my future. I started small. I reached out to a therapist, someone I could talk to without fear of judgment. The sessions were painful at first, forcing me to confront emotions I'd tried to bury. But slowly, they became a lifeline, helping me process the grief and shame that had consumed me. I also began to focus on my physical health. I joined a gym, using the anger and frustration as fuel for early morning workouts. The routine gave me structure, something to hold on to when everything else felt chaotic. Meanwhile, Sophia's life continued to spiral. Her business closed within months, and I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved out of our old house. The vibrant, confident woman I had once loved was now a shadow of herself, struggling to pick up the pieces of her own life. The leaked photos and messages had left her reputation in shambles. She tried to put on a brave face, posting sporadic updates on social media, but the responses were cruel, mocking comments and judgmental remarks that only added to her misery. It wasn't just her professional life that suffered. Personally, she seemed isolated. Ryan had abandoned her, and many of her friends distanced themselves to avoid the drama. 1 year after the separation, I looked in the mirror and hardly recognized myself. Not because I was broken, but because I was stronger. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I had started to rebuild in every sense of the word. My career was thriving. After months of dedicating myself to new projects, I had earned a promotion. I had reconnected with old friends, rebuilt relationships that had been neglected during my marriage. And while I wasn't ready for a new relationship, I began to feel the faint stirrings of hope. The idea that, someday, I might find someone who valued me for who I was. One evening, I received an email from Sophia. It was short and filled with regret. James. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to tell you how sorry I am. Losing you was the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I think about it every day. I wish I could go back and undo everything I did. I just wanted you to know that I'll always regret losing you. Sophia. I read the email twice before closing it without replying. There was nothing left to say. For the first time, I realized I no longer felt anger or sadness when I thought of her. Only a quiet sense of closure. Looking back, I realized that what happened with Sophia was more than just a painful chapter in my life, it was a turning point. Her betrayal forced me to confront the truths about our relationship, about myself, and about the kind of love I deserved. Trust is the foundation of any partnership, and once it's broken, rebuilding it requires more than apologies. It requires honesty, accountability, and a willingness to truly change. Sophia couldn't give me that, and her choices left scars that will always be a part of my story. But those scars taught me something valuable: my worth isn't defined by someone else's actions. As for Sophia, the life she chose crumbled under the weight of her decisions. The allure of her secret relationship with Ryan was fleeting, leaving her with nothing but regret and a tarnished reputation. She became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when fleeting desires overshadow genuine love. For me, the journey was different. The pain of her betrayal pushed me to grow, to rebuild, and to find strength I didn't know I had. While it took time, I eventually rediscovered a sense of purpose and hope. If there's one lesson to take from this experience, it's this: never settle for less than you deserve, and never let someone else's betrayal diminish your worth. Relationships are built on trust, respect, and mutual effort. When those pillars crumble, it's better to walk away and rebuild your life than to stay in something that no longer serves you. I'll always carry the lessons I learned from my time with Sophia. But instead of dwelling on the pain, I choose to focus on the future, one filled with the kind of honesty, love, and respect I know I deserve.